Hey everybody, welcome to another unscheduled stream. Working on my comic book. It's been a while since I've done a stream. I figured I was going to say it's Saturday night, but it's Sunday at 1 in the morning. So, yeah, it's a little bit later than I thought. But I've got my setup now a little bit truer to how I work. I've also got a new camera, which hopefully you guys can tell the difference. It's got a ring light on it and makes for a little bit easier in terms of or it makes for a little bit better of a picture and makes it a little bit easier for me to stream. It's also got a mic built into it. It might not be as good as the Blue Snowball mic that I've been using, but it's a lot more convenient in terms of getting work done. So my name is Shanth Enjeti Art. If this is your first time being here, welcome, welcome, welcome. I have a Patreon. The link is in the description, where I post all kinds of nonsense. And if you are a patron, you let me know what your contact information is. So two things: patron on one end, and getting your contact information to me in a private message, um, I will be sending out stickers. So I'm going to be sending out some stickers to my patrons just as soon as I've got their contact information. And right now I'm working on a comic book that's going to launch on Indiegogo. Either actually, I should say it's going to launch on Indiegogo before the new year, so by the end of this year. I've come to that realization that that's when I want to do it. Just very recently, but I want to be doing comics, and I've been doing comics my entire life, but and also illustrating. But I don't think I ever got to a point where I wanted to, or I had the skill set and the idea that I wanted to do up until recently, and I had really developed it and thought about it. But I'm a couple pages into it right now, and I'm loving it. And my goal is to have this thing ready to crowdfund by um, for December. So this is the lead character, and this scene involves a grimoire, Necronomicon, uh, reference to, of course, the great H.P. Lovecraft, who is from my state. And if you know anything about the Thulu mythos, the way that the lead character stumbles upon that mythos partially involves an art school student who went to the college that I went to. So kind of feels like things are going a little bit full circle. In fact, the artist in the story um, has their studio in the Fleur de Lis building, and my one of my mentors, who was born on the exact same day and 50 years before I was born, had his studio in the Fleur de Lis building. So I've actually have a lot of really crazy H.P. Lovecraft connections. In addition to the fact that I live in the state and went to college in the town where H.P. Lovecraft grew up, and where most of his, or actually not most of his stories, where a lot of his stories take place. So, yeah, this is a little bit of H.P. Lovecraft fun in a graphic novel, and it's going to be the third. It's going to be both my first comic book and the first of this series, anyways. By no means my first comic, but it's going to be one of my first comics in this painted style. It's also going to contain um, the third chapter of my art books, so it'll be both book three and book one, and I'm looking forward to that. So here we go. I am really excited to get the scope on this to be a little bit larger. So that's what I'm working on right now is, putting in the stairwells and putting in the characters. There's a lot of stuff, and it partially could be for copyright reasons. But there's a lot of stuff that's involving the Thulu mythos right now, and I think it's great. I think it's really really cool because it's sort of like with zombie stories. I like the idea of people taking these what are now essentially American folk stories that are created um, somewhat recently, but that have come into the public domain, whether it's because of George A. Romero changing the title of Night of the Living Dead, or the fact that H.P. Lovecraft's works are coming into the public domain more or less. That you're seeing a lot of these really brilliant ideas come to the forefront just at the exact same time that a lot of our older myths, or I should say our corporate-owned myths, are dying. In many cases, due to the negligence of the people who are in charge of them. And I say, great. I say, as much as I love them, as heartbreaking as it can be on some levels, I think it's time for creators to step up and to bring new stuff out because we can't depend on comics to be run by corporations and independent creators, whether it's Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, Todd McFarlane, gosh, one of my early heroes, Tim Vigil, or people who are doing it now, like Ethan Van Sciver or John Malin or any of those guys. Kyle Ritter comes to mind. I'm waiting for my copy of Starblades. If you don't know Kyle Ritter's work, check it out. Kyle Ritter's amazing. He does animation. Um, he's a deaf mute who has a YouTube channel, does animation, colors, pencils, inks, everything digital. This guy is amazing. I'm a huge, huge fan of Kyle Ritter's work. If you haven't seen it, by all means, please check it out. It's incredible stuff. Love Kyle. So yeah, so I'm waiting on my copy of Starblades. Can't wait to get that. Um, and love the colors. Love Kyle's color sense. He also colors a lot of different books. Oh, and then I'm also waiting for, and I don't know when this book is going to be done because I think it's still in progress. But I'm also waiting for a comic book called Snowman, and I just saw some of the early colors for it. I think that campaign is still going, but I just saw some early colors for it, and oh my god, that book looks like it's going to be beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So when I'm working on something like this, the big thing is just trying to get down those base colors first. So here is a look at one of the faces of one of the characters in the book. Let me see if I can get her in focus. There we go. And then this is a vampire character getting a very uncomfortable sword going into his head at this point. So that's sort of the rescue that this character is about to perform as they're summoning this massive demon, and the demon is coming through a gateway. And I did this page of the demon coming through the gateway, but it's going to be sideways. So there's the gate, there's the small figure in frame, and then there is the gigantic demon character that's coming through, and you can see it's just this massive crazy like cephalopod body and almost like a just a fanged multi-eyed creature. And the book is the book is my favorite stuff I've ever done. It's coming together. I mean, I hope people like it as much as I'm enjoying it right now, but it's just some of my it's basically everything about my art books that I enjoy that I'm trying to put into this project, into this story. And it's I did some, if you've backed my second art book or my first art book for that matter, you get a look at the fantasy stuff. But in my second art book, I actually started to add elements of sequential art into it as kind of a test to see what that might look like. And I had a really great time doing it. And I kind of, decided to rip the band aid off, as my wife always loves to say. She loves that expression. And go for, a comic book because there's just a great time to be making comics right now. The indie scene is the coolest I think it's been in terms of really creative, outstanding projects. And like some of the projects I just mentioned, when I look at those artists, I feel this kind of enthusiasm because their stuff is so good. You just go, oh wow, I want to be a part of that. I don't know how to word it, but I think it's because it inspires you. It's this kind of inspiring, you know, I don't want to say it's not really competition because you know ultimately it's about finishing the books and everybody's in kind of a running their own race. But it's when you see really great work, it makes you excited to do great work as well, or at least hopefully it does. And so I've missed that. I've missed seeing people swinging for the fences when they're doing their work. And so for me, that's what I mean. If nothing else comes out of this, I'm going to be grateful that I was inspired to tell a story and to put brush to paper. And every single time I work on this project, every single time I get a new idea, and I'm making references to things in the artwork that that inspire me. But one of the things that I'm really inspired by that has been informing this book in a very odd way this week is Goonies. The Goonies. Love that movie. I just got it on Blu-ray, and just got it on Blu-ray, and it came with the map, the treasure map from Goonies. If you don't know what Goonies is, um, go check it out. And if you, I would love to know what people make of that who did not grow up on it nostalgia-wise, because I love it. I cannot, I can't look at that flick any other way other than with. I adore it. I've heard people say, yeah, there's movies like Goonies. You go back and watch them, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I thought that was good. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I loved that movie, and I still do. I think it's fantastic. Same thing with E.T. Love that movie. Spielberg was the author of a lot of my childhood. So was George Lucas, for that matter. And so now, like that, I'm in this stage of my art making. A lot of the artists who've come along and inspired me are people like H.P. Lovecraft, people like Guillermo del Toro, people. Gosh, just trying to think of all the people that have inspired me. Guillermo del Toro, H.P. Lovecraft. Just take a look and see what I've got over here. There's a lot of Guillermo del Toro. Oh, Frank Frazetta, big time. I'm a huge Frank Frazetta fan, massive Frank Frazetta fan. And so whenever I'm doing my work, that's a huge part of it. Is just I'm inspired by a lot of work right now, and I think after doing my first two art books and shipping them, I sort of got gained the I don't want to say that I didn't have confidence that I could do it before because I mean I'm just too much of a nerd to not be able to get everything shipped out. I mean sometimes with the pandemic we hit a lot of things got crazy, things got very strange, and so obviously that has an impact. But we just shipped off our books and got that wrapped up, and so now I'm ready for the third one. I think I just want to make a little bit more headway on it than I did on book two, because book two had a lot of artwork in it that was supposed to be my first art book. So I came up with this idea to do a book, to do an art book, and I started doing all this horror art. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of doing that book, like it hadn't been advertised yet or launched yet, but all of a sudden, right in the middle of doing that book, I got this idea into my head that I was going to start painting a lot of gorillas, giant gorillas. It happens, folks. It's one of those things. And so I started doing all of these gorilla paintings, and all of a sudden I had this massive amount of work that didn't go together. So I thought, okay, well here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the gorilla artwork and I'm going to make another art book, and I'll come back to this horror artwork, and then I can do my next book with that. The problem was is that by the time I returned to do that book, it took me a little bit of time to get into that horror groove. So here's how my artwork goes in terms of my themes that I work on, and it's the weirdest thing in the world. I get super into gorillas and positive things when it's during the winter time. So I'll paint gorillas and nature scenes. And when it comes to the summer, that's when I get really into horror. I'm always kind of out of whack with the things that I'm interested in season wise. So I get into the Halloween mood in the winter and into the summer sometimes, and then a lot of times when things are a little bit more dreary in the start of the winter, I want to paint stuff that's adventurous. And what's cool about this book and what's going to be great about this project is it's kind of a combination of both. It's going to be my love of werewolves, my love of vampires, my love of action adventure, comics, and swashbuckling. So it's going to have, but also just raw action and adventure. You know, one of the comics that was a huge touchstone for me when I was coming up was a comic book that was a very I want to say it was a very low print run because I think there were a lot of copies hanging out. It was a comic book called Grips by Tim Vigil, and I was huge into Tim Vigil's artwork. The person who told me about Tim Vigil was my a buddy from back home from school, or I should say from back where I grew up, not back home. Home is in Rhode Island. But but hugely influenced me is a guy named Zach Cullis, and Zach introduced me to comics, as did his brother. Also introduced me to a game I didn't even understand that was called Call of Cthulhu, but we pronounced it Cthulhu, I think, or at least I did. And it's crazy how certain people can come into your life that you meet when you're young, and they just introduce you to so much stuff. Zach introduced me to Tim Vigil, Grips, Indie Comics, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Todd McFarlane, who is like this major touchstone for a lot of our artistic lives. To say that you're a fan of Todd McFarlane if you're in my generation is to say you're a fan of water. It's fine if you're not. It's not like everybody in my generation is a huge Todd McFarlane fan, but a lot of us are. It's one of the least surprising things someone from my generation can tell me. Oh, I was a huge fan of Todd McFarlane. Oh, I bought Spawn, when I was in school. It's not like it's not a shocker. I think something that's probably a lot more rare were people who bought and were interested in a comic book called Grips, and it's such a big influence to me. When you look over my shoulder, that is a print I just recently got. It's from the year Grips came out in the '80s, and I got it so that I could have it up behind me when I stream, and also when I go to sit down at my chair to do my artwork. So this right here is is me putting in the muscle tone right now into this character. I'm just kind of noodling a little bit. I'll do this from time to time when I'm when it's late at night. I'll break out a see if I can move this down just a little bit more so you can get a better look at it. There we go. So sometimes late at night I'll go through this noodling phase where I will just get out a small technical pen, disposable technical pen, and just kind of like rough in these very small details. Let me see if I can move that. See, the trick with filming myself drawing is getting that camera angle. Where the heck is that camera angle? That's kind of strange. All right, there we go. So that it's not blocking your view. And unfortunately, I haven't yet mastered it. But it's hard to, it can be hard sometimes to stay in the zone drawing when you're thinking about the camera angles. So, and this is just roughing stuff in. It's not going to be perfect at this point because I'm focused on streaming. It'll look good when it's done, hopefully. So yeah, I mean, I got Grips was a huge influence on me, and I got really. I've always liked indie films. I've always like, and when I say independent films, I don't mean esoteric or pretentious art house films. And I'm not saying all art house films are pretentious, but a lot of pretentious films. Well, actually, that's not true anymore. I think there's a lot of pretentious Hollywood films right now, but I always have loved people like Robert Rodriguez, who did a movie called Desperado and Once Upon a Time in Mexico. So there were people who were doing kind of low budget mainstream films. George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead obviously is great. And so, when I see people doing what I think comics is needed for a very long time, which is a robust, independent movement by creators who are not interested in illustrating for a small niche audience, but are trying to really get their work out there to the biggest audience possible. It's a real shot in the arm for me, creatively to see that happening. And it's that's why they actually the creators I was following at the time really inspired me to do my first art book, and that was it was my first Indiegogo campaign, so it wasn't even a comic book. They just inspired me to make artwork and to put it out there, and I was a little reluctant because I love comics. I'm very passionate about comics, and it took a lot of it took a lot out of me early on when I was working and doing the odd freelance job in comics, but also just the frustration of how hard it was for me to get my work out there. And I've tried independent publishing and a bunch of stuff like that. And it was kind of a heartbreaking process. And I kind of, I've kind of said, so many times to my wife, like, I'm done, I'm out. Like, if I ever say I'm going to do comics again, you know, stop me, because it was just so frustrating. And what is really strange is, of course, I've continued to draw comics. It's like a long running joke with us. But the thing about it is that when I was doing the comic book work and when I've been, developing all of this stuff, I kind of every time I would print an art book, I would refer to it when it came in, even though it had the second one did. There wasn't sequential art in it. I would say, "Oh yeah, we got to ship off the comic books." My wife would go, "What do you mean comic books? It's art books." And it's like, "Yeah, I know. I just obviously my mind is thinking about comics." And I finally kind of, had a bunch of different things come together, and it led me to realizing that, I said basically, I thought to myself, to the universe, I was like, send me a sign if I'm supposed to, be doing comic books. I mean, that's what I want to do, but I don't want to, you know, I don't want to be just, doing it for the wrong reasons, because I love comics so, so much. I love, it's funny, I follow artists more than I follow, writers, characters, and stories. And I just felt really inspired. And I was like, I'll know it's right if certain things happen, or, if, I don't know how to describe it. It's a really tough thing to describe when you get to that kind of point. I mean, I'm in my 40s right now, and you just don't waste your time at this age. Hopefully, you don't want to waste your time on anything. And I've got kids, and um, I'm married with, and I've got kids. That sounded like a pitch for that sitcom. But I'm married. I've got children, and my time with them is incredibly precious to me. And you don't just throw yourself into something, random, because your time is so important. And I love comics, so that was never an issue for me in terms of whether I loved it or not. But I was like, I want to see if, first I wanted to see if there was interest enough in my artwork to fund an Indiegogo, and that happened twice. And then the next thing was I wanted to see if the people that I admired who were working in comics, if they thought that there was any, gosh, I don't know what the proper word is, if they thought that there was any merit in the stuff that I was doing. I mean, if like I was out of my mind, to think like, oh, this stuff could look good. And yeah, there just kept on being all these instances of me meeting people and them saying, oh, yeah, hey, yeah, sure. And people I really admire, who are doing independent comics. And I just thought to myself, if they admire, or not admire, wrong word, I admire them, but if they think the work is solid, let's say, then, you know, I should, take that as a vote of confidence and not be, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for here, but take them at their word and not be afraid to develop this work, not be afraid to take it where it needs to go. And and I asked for the universe to send me a sign of, just that I was making a decent decision, and it did. So I'm feel very comfortable and confident in what I'm doing right now, because I've spent I've given it a lot of thought. And like everything, that you do like this, it is a bit of a leap of faith, but I have faith in the leap. I guess that's the best way I could put it. There we go. So this is the fun part. Whenever I do some nonsensical scribbling, which is what I was doing right there, I always go in and I kind of like obliterate it a little bit, and I'll put in like a nice wash of color to kind of tie things together and to give it that sort of, atmospheric perspective that I'm going to go for with this, and just kind of flesh it out a little bit, because I want to try to get as much of this done as I can in terms of I want to work in such a way to where, as I always say, I'm getting 80% of the work done in the first 20% of the time, because it gives you a lot more time to refine things and polish them. And so that's what you're seeing right here. You're seeing me refining this work and kind of putting this character together. And so when I go and I move the camera out and you see the other stuff that I'm doing, which would be things like this, with this vampire character, with this figure's face, with this character reading from the book, you can see how things get much more refined. And this character is kind of, I don't want to say this character is an afterthought by any stretch, but this character compositionally is not. Um, this character compositionally is there to kind of recede back into space. And because you know what's coming, you're going to see this character holding a sword, and you're going to know this character is about to talk another character out of what they're doing permanently. And so I want to make sure that I get that feel into this and have that character sitting back in space. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to rough that in. And again, for those of you guys just joining us, my name is Shanth Enjeti. This is Shanth Enjeti Art, and this is an upcoming Indiegogo comic book project. Following on the heels of my two art books that I was able to fund on Indiegogo, and both have shipped now. So it is great to be on the other side of that, and hopefully getting to the other side of all this craziness. I don't know if the craziness ever stops, but you get the idea. Um, and you know, just I am so excited about doing a comic. Can't even tell you. Comics are my first love, and something that it's on my buck. I've already drawn comics, and I've even done comic book work professionally to some degree. But doing something that you're really really proud of is, it's not that you don't try hard when you do these things, but our skill sets and our timing of certain things mature at different times. And my skill set and my work is kind of undergoing this maturing process right now, and it's the best it's ever been. I'm the most I'm the most prolific I've ever been, and I'm also the most skilled I've ever been. And it's a really great. It's really great when those two things come together, and probably the skill helps with you being prolific. But yeah, it's great. And then all just the opportunities that have been you know available with the Indiegogo thing. It's so great to have two books on the other side of things. So that's how I'll go in and I'll rough in anatomy. Now, bear in mind, this is a pretty small panel. Like, that's my thumb. So you're looking at how small that is. And it's you really got to kind of, keep it loose, or it'll be kind of unnecessary. So artists like Frank Frazetta and people like that who've inspired me with their work, they do some really great atmospheric stuff. And that's what I'm going to try to make sure I keep as I'm roughing this in. Because you're going to get to all of this stuff, which is going to be much more detailed in the foreground. You can kind of see how a shot like that works. If you render that out too much, like if I and I'm going to render that Necronomicon a little bit more, it gets crazy. Oh Lord, let's see. Oh my gosh. Okay, so career advice. Heavens to Betsy. So let me think. Yeah, best career advice in the world is always going to be start with a thank you, end with a thank you. Start with saying hi, my name is, when you meet people, saying um, thank you so much, like, thank you so much for having me here today, appreciate the opportunity. Those are the big things I would say. Always do those. Always do those. And then what else is there? Gosh, let me think. um, oh yeah, make sure your website and your web presence is always cleaned up. And let's see what else. People always say have questions to ask. um, I always think um, that's great if you have specific questions. Oh, yes, go to their website or whatever they have, look at their mission statement, and make sure that you're acknowledging what they are after. If they have this thing where they're like, we're a small indie thing and we're proud of our thing, blah, 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 make sure you let them know that you have read that stuff and you know who they are. Because sometimes people will go into a job interview and they think about, or anything, any kind of project, and they're thinking about what what they want to get out of it. And the biggest thing people are looking for right now are employees who want to bring something to the table. And you're lucky right now, at least. I think a lot of people are fortunate um, that we're in a situation where there are a lot of job openings out there right now. There are more job openings than there are people who can fill them or who are willing to fill them. And you have to figure out where those things are. But I just think it's a really good time to be going out into the job market, as odd as that may sound, um, because I just keep hearing from people how hard it is to find good employees, and emphasis on good. So just show up, be professional, crush it. That's all you gotta do. Seems easy. I mean, when I put it like that, but it's really it gets easier too. You get less nerve wracked the more you do. So bear that stuff in mind. Hopefully that helps. Let's see here. What am I gonna do with this one? Okay, put those two marks in there. I don't know if anybody can hear it, but whenever I'm painting late at night and I'm doing this kind of haunted stuff, I have to have something on in the background. And one of the things I have on the background right now is I have a rain and thunderstorm. So I'm doing a little bit of what Guillermo del Toro does as far as having a rain room in his house, although a lot less cool. I've got a 10 hours of rain and thunder on YouTube video playing. Oh, nice. Excellent. Yeah, send away. Yeah, painting is. I always say that it's a shame that I think a lot of people are frightened or scared off by painting because it seems like it's such a big thing. But once you get into it, and once you get over that initial fear and you get a good introduction to it, it's so much easier. It just you can't imagine. I mean, I'm someone who was terrified of color, and I was terrified of painting. And people look at me and they just wouldn't believe that now. They're just like, oh wow, well you're a painter. I'm like, yeah, I'm a painter now, but don't think ever think how you feel about painting when you're in your 20s is going to dictate how it's going to be forever, because I was terrified of painting and I wasn't very good at it when I was in my 20s. I didn't start really getting into it, actually, early 20s. Then I started really practicing. And I'd say now I'm the most comfortable painting I've ever been, just because I've now done so much of it. Yeah, painting is it's a really funny thing because a lot of the things that anything that's worth doing takes a while to learn how to do it well enough before you can actually have fun at it. And most people don't want to push past the part of it where it's not fun. And it's really, I mean, it's unfortunate, but you know, it's yeah. I mean, there's you. It's not about how easy these things feel when you start them. It's ultimately it's your discipline in terms of pushing past that phase, because it gets easy and it's way more fun when you're good at something. Way more fun when you get to that point. But it's most people can't push through the misery. That's why there's so many bad paintings out there. Um, people people just want to slop paint around sometimes, and it's like it's I mean, it may be fun for them to make it, but it's not always fun to look at. And when you're good at it and you learn it, and anyone who's had me and had me go through painting with them usually gets competent. And when you get to that point, you're just like, oh wow, this why was I so worried about this? It's where you want to be. And I was fortunate that I had Brian Stelfreeze who really helped me to understand what painting was. I had to do a lot of legwork because I wasn't in Atlanta. I had to do a lot of the legwork teaching myself how to actually put the painting stuff together. But he made me understand it. He made me understand, oh, that's something that people can do. And it's you want to see artists doing paintings that you would think, oh wow, like you want to see people doing things that you would want to paint. So if you're interested in doing like fantasy art or comic book artwork, it does seeing abstract expressionism, and someone saying, oh, this is how I do an abstract expressionist painting, doesn't hit you the same way. as seeing somebody do something representational, something that's fantasy based. And I and much like with comics, if someone did when someone did comics and they had some advice for me, and I was looking at their stuff, I just was all ears, completely inspired and excited to look at it. And yeah, I think that when people see like what that you can actually make paintings that you're excited about, that's a huge part of getting into it. Okay, this. There we go. That is incredibly tiny, tiny, tiny. Goodness gracious. There we go. And I'm going to be doing a lot more of these streams, so which is good because I need to do it more. Got to promote my comics and promote my next Indiegogo. So here we go. So this right here. Oh, and I should point this out too because this is big. In addition to talking about H.P. Lovecraft's influence, in addition to talking about, um, you know, all of the different artists who have inspired me, the other aspect of this that I want to make sure I talk about is there's a nod to Hammer horror films in all of my stuff lately, and that would not be possible without my good friend um, over at the YouTube channel The Choice Voice and Starship Valiant, um, Michael King. Now, Michael King introduced me, and I gave a faculty meeting talk about my work recently, and Michael King um, is one of those guys who just said, I went to his YouTube channel and I found out all about Hammer horror films. Thank you, Casey. I found out all about those horror films, and I was looking at Hammer horror and I was like, going, oh my god, how have I not heard about this? And then he was also a huge Blade fan, so we did a stream together that was really cool, a really cool podcast. It was cool for me. I hopefully people liked it, and I'm glad. Hopefully Michael liked it. But he introduced me to Hammer horror films, and so there's an actress that one of my characters in here is inspired by named Madeline Smith. And Madeline Smith was in one of the first Hammer horror movies that I watched, and so it's a cross between every character I paint is going to always be a little cross between an actress or actor from a particular time period. This isn't though. I think this is based. This may be potentially based on me. I don't know. That's how I feel some days. Just in terms of like all of my characters, I think it's about arthritis with this one here. But yeah, they're always based on. People always say once I'm done with a character that they look like my wife, no matter what I do. So I'm always like, okay, maybe that's her. Um, but if it wasn't for Michael, I wouldn't have had that influence in my work. And I talked about him during this presentation on my work for thing. I wanted to keep it based on things that had happened in the last year because this has been, although it's been an absolutely insane time period, it's really been a productive year, and I've been very happy with how I've made use of my time that I've had, and it's been exhausting and all those things, like it has been for a lot of people. But I don't work in an ER, so I'm not gonna remotely complain about any level of exhaustion that I have. But for my artwork, I've had a lot of time, to really look at things and to kind of push things forward. And I think that's what makes it great. That's what makes putting this stuff together and creating so much fun is that you kind of look at things, or at least I look at things and I go, well, someone's coming off of their day and they want to put an art book in their collection. I want it to be a book that they're excited to see or read or look at or whatever it is. And I sort of feel like this escapism thing is really, really important. And I think people are exhausted a lot of times, particularly, when you've got kids and you've got a job and you've got, you know, um, people depending on you in your life, in terms of dependence and things like that, that you need entertainment to help you to escape. And you're seeing a lot of people start to openly discuss that, like, hey, whatever happened to escapism? Maybe people don't want to be lectured when they come off of a long day. And it's like, no, you don't think you think so, huh? No kidding. And so that's the stuff that, at least right now for me, is what I want to kind of dedicate my time to. Is I know what I want to do. I know what inspires me, and it's like the I heard Ethan talking recently about was it Ethan or was it Zach? Maybe I think it was Ethan, and he said something to the effect of Stan Lee's wife saying to him when he was ready to quit comics and he was just exhausted, just do one your way. Before you quit, comics completely, just do one book the way you think it should be. And he did the Fantastic Four, which was sort of the springboard for everything that Marvel Comics kind of became. It's like Jack Kirby and him sort of just getting it done. And so for me, whenever I'm looking at this stuff, I'm thinking about it in terms of, you know, this comic book for me and this works, all these works I'm doing, these art books and everything are me sort of saying, I'm going to do this my way. I'm going to put the stuff together. I'm going to make what I think is exciting. And it's not a selfish thing. It's not like, oh, love it or leave it. But there were so many restrictions, so many things, whether it's Diamond Comics distribution, its publishers, its print costs, so many things that were prohibitive to having any level of freedom. So you could have all the work ethic in the world, and there were so many hurdles to go over just to get your stuff out there, just to get seen. And right now, I'm in a time period where that's not the case at all. Right now, if you've got a creative idea, if you've got something interesting to say, people can help you fund it, and people can make cool stuff happen. They can help you to make your artwork everything you want it to be. And so when I sit down and I think about the stuff I'm going to be doing, it's like sky is the limit. And that's where and what all this stuff is about. It's about opening gates, it's about opening doors, it's about illustrating figures, it's about making adventure comics with vampires and castles and pirate ships and whatever else you want to be doing. And you can make great stuff. You can make exciting stuff. And you can do it with people who are not interested in any of the bullshit that's going on in the world right now. Not interested in politics, not interested in any of that. They're just interested in making stuff free of censorship and free of a lot of the, I don't know, a lot of the nonsense that goes into creative processes. It's just us, the paper, and our fans and customers supporting us so that we can make this stuff. That's what I'm about. That's what I'm looking forward to doing. So hopefully you guys have inspired, have been enjoying this little glimpse into this. But it's a super inspiring process, and I'm going to get back to it in full force. So take care, everybody. Have a great evening, and thank you so much for coming in and checking it out. This is going to be my next comic. It's going to be on Indiegogo. Stay tuned here for more information on it. I'm probably going to put up a pre-launch page to collect emails soon. So take care, everybody. I will see you soon, and yeah, have a good evening. Take care.